order to establish a quorum and make this meeting official, I would like to ask the city clerk, Patty Spencer, to please call the roll.
Pezza.
Here.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Polumsky.
Here.
York.
Here.
Kipskin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
14 present, 0 absent.
Thank you, City Clerk. For agenda item number 3, receipt of written communications and petitions from the public. City Clerk Spencer, is there anyone who signed in to speak today?
Well, this is written communications, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Any written communications? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, being the public forum. City Clerk Spencer, is there anyone who signed in for the public forum today?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we have 3. I'll start with Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
My name is Claude Pagach, 566 West Gladys. I'd like to start this with a couple of questions. Number 1, what is the minimum amount before a service or a contract has to be let by the city for public bid? Secondly, since it was brought up last week, I would like to know what it costs the city of Elmhurst per square foot for the property on Addison where this parking garage is going up. And also, since Paulie's is on the agenda, I would like to know what the city is paying per square foot for that piece of property. Also, since it was brought up that we have to consider legal fees, demolishing fees, EPA come in, I have to dig up a little more land. I hope the owner gave the city a break on all that. But I really would like to know what it costs per square foot, so we got some idea what a bargain Superior Ambulance got. I'd also like to point out the fact that the assistant city manager is hard of hearing. See, you had a consultant here, and he was talking about Han, but he left with one message. Do not set up a zillion parameters if you're going to get somebody in here to try to work the property. Because he's going to tell you one thing like I told you last time. It's my money, and I don't need you guys spending it. If you want it, you pay for it. And the assistant city manager said there was a list already around to who to send it to. Well, we do have people on the aldermanic level here who deal with real estate. And as was pointed out, a lot of people didn't bid on it. Maybe they ought to go to her and get a broader idea of just who they can bring in. Wouldn't want a consultant or somebody telling the city and giving them a limited number of people. Doesn't work. And in regards to Public Works, was there last week. We called our alderman and he told us that nobody called him about the 65 or 95 gallon garbage disposal units that the city is harping about and would like everybody to have. Well, the unfortunate thing is this. The rubbish hauler goes to the dump by tonnage. And I have yet to have anybody describe to me what the relationship is between a 65-gallon can and the tonnage that he has to pay at the dump. And I also don't quite understand what a gallon of garbage looks like. I know what a pound of garbage looks like, but not a gallon. And this concept that everybody is going to get a 65 or 95 gallon, well, just how many pounds is that? Because, like I said, the hauler at the dump pays by tonnage. They don't walk up to his truck and say, oh, you got a 3,000-gallon truck. No, don't happen. So before you guys all vote on this 65 and 95 gallon, can you tell us what a 1 gallon of garbage is? I'd appreciate it.
As always, thank you, Claude. City Clerk Spencer.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline Avenue.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline. Regarding items H and I on tonight's consent agenda, which is renewal of consultant contracts, I attended all meetings of the Finance Committee when this matter was on the agenda, waiting to hear a substantive discussion about the nuts and bolts of these contracts. I'm still waiting. I thought the committee might request to hear from the consultants themselves. That never happened. We did hear a lot about what good and honorable people the consultants are, which is great, but that is an insufficient basis on which to renew these contracts. Why renew for 3-year terms at the same number of hours per year without even looking at the specific job functions that are being performed? It seems that the goal from the outset has been renewal as is of these contracts, preserving the status quo, and perhaps that's why a proper objective review has not yet been undertaken. The committee even went so far as to preclude timely public comment at the last meeting, seemingly to avoid discussion. To me, that was a mean-spirited exercise of the chair's discretion, which was apparently supported by the rest of the committee as that decision went unchallenged. The recommendation is for these contracts to be renewed for 3-year terms. So right now is the only definite time there will be any discussion about them for 3 years. Why was there no mention of the possibility of setting the contract term for 1 or 2 years at a time? The reports claim reductions in yearly hours. In fact, the proposed caps for the new contracts reflect exactly the number of annual hours actually worked over the past 3 years. We may be budgeting less than in previous years, but will end up paying the same amount in actual dollars. And what about the scope of job duties? Despite the wording in the reports, I did not hear the committee review specifics of the duties being performed or discuss whether there might be some duties which may not merit continuing consultant involvement. For one example, there are numerous instances of communication between the real estate consultant and a property management company that the city also pays $5,000 per month for what appear to be routine property management issues. Couldn't those communications occur directly between the property manager and the assistant city manager? Maybe there's a good reason why a middle layer is needed in those communications, but since the committee never addressed it, that question and other similar ones remain unanswered. My understanding was that the hiring of a full-time assistant city manager was to be accompanied by a reduction in consultant work. Apparently not. And finally, there's the issue of potential conflict of interest. First, the city attorney has so far declined to give an interpretation of the current contract provision. But secondly, and even more important, this is not strictly a legal issue. Even the appearance of impropriety is harmful and may undermine people's confidence in their government. I think that potential conflicts clearly exist at the moment, yet there are ways to mitigate them. What we must not do is shut our collective eyes to the problem, nor can we expect it to be solved through self-policing by the consultants. I believe the City Council should not approve the Finance Committee reports as they currently stand until the questions I just discussed are answered. Thanks.
Last, we have Liz Whitmire, 908 Sailor.
Good evening, Liz Whitmire, 908 Sailor. Just here tonight to ask for an update on ComEd. At the last regular City Council meeting, Alderman Healy did ask for an update, and I did hear our city manager say we would have one tonight. However, I do not see that on the agenda, so I was kind of hoping we'd hear it in the closing reports tonight. If not, when will we hear from ComEd? Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes public forum as far as anyone signed in. Anyone else want to speak at the microphone? You could address the mayor with that.
Anyone else in the audience who would like to speak at the public forum? Seeing none, that will close public forum for this evening. Moving on to agenda item 5, which is announcements. Any announcements by any of the elected officials? Clerk Spencer.
I have a big announcement regarding candidate filing date change. Due to the recent passage of Senate Bill SB 3338, the last day for the filing period of nomination materials for the April 9th, 2013 consolidated election has changed from Monday, December 24th, 2012 to Wednesday, December 26th, 2012.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer. Any other announcements from Alderman Dunn?
Thank you. I just wanted to announce that Alderman Leader and I are hosting a forum for the North Growey Woods neighborhood in reference to some recent burglaries that occurred there in the past month or two. That will be held at Mary Queen of Heaven Church on West Avenue on the north side of town from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And we'll have several representatives from our police department there to address the citizens' concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunn. Alderman Healy?
Thank you. I'm pleased to announce, and really not announce, but just to give recognition to two of our schools in town. Lincoln School and Bryan School were recently awarded the very prestigious Blue Ribbon Award from the U.S. Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan. 269 schools nationwide received this recognition. There were only 13 in the entire state of Illinois, and 2 of them are here in Elmhurst. So congratulations to Lincoln School, grade school, Bryan Junior High, and District 205. Last Thursday, both schools held gatherings, assemblies to celebrate their awarding of the Blue Ribbon. Myself and former Mayor DeCiani were able to attend the Lincoln assembly, and then Mayor DeCiani attended the Bryan assembly later that day. And in fact, last Thursday, November 29th, was in fact Blue Ribbon Schools Day here in Elmhurst. So just want to give a shout out to those schools and all the kids and families and faculty and staff that made that happen. It's very prestigious, and to have 2 of those schools in town is an outstanding accomplishment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Healy. Alderman Dunn, in regards to the Growy Woods meeting, could you please restate the date if you did not previously?
That is this Thursday, Alderman Bram, at 12/6 from 7 p.m. to 8:30 at Mary Queen of Heaven Church.
Thank you. Alderman Mulliner, then Alderman Morley.
Special Kids Day is this Wednesday at the Wilder Mansion. I believe the hours are 3 to 8. I hope I'm right on the hours, but I know it's this Wednesday.
Thank you, Alderman Mulliner. Alderman Morley. No announcement. Anyone else? Okay, that concludes our announcements for today. Moving on to agenda item 6, which is the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would like to remove any item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. Items H, I, and F, F like Frank.
So that is F,
No.
H, and I.
No, it's H, I, and double F, sorry.
H, I, and double F. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I would like to ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda in its entirety minus H, I, and double F. Alderman Morley? And Alderman Wagner is the second. Clerk Spencer, roll.
Morley.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Pezza.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Volumsky.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
Consent agenda passes minus H, I, and double F.
As Alderman, he puts the gavel down. And he does.
The agenda item H being a report, real estate consultant services. Clerk Spencer, can you please
This
read
is H.
H?
Okay. It is therefore the recommendation of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee that the City Council direct the City Attorney to prepare a consultant agreement with Van Slyke Enterprises, Inc. for real estate consultant services as described above. Respectfully submitted, Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee. Stephen W. Hipskin, signed by Stephen W. Hipskin, Chairman, Kevin L. York, Vice Chairman, Mark A. Mulliner, and Scott M. Levin.
I need a motion and a second to put this item on the floor for discussion. Alderman Hipskin as first motion and Alderman York as the second. Alderman Hipskin?
Yeah, I say we take item H, the real estate consultant, and there are questions about it?
Any questions? Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. I did have questions. I actually submitted a long list of questions and concerns. regarding these contracts several weeks ago, and I basically received no response. So I feel like they were pretty much ignored, and just as one of the commenters stated, it's just business as usual. So I also asked for a written opinion as to whether or not these individuals actually crossed the line under their current contract regarding potential conflict and other items in their conflict clause, and really didn't receive much of a response to that either. It's just apparent to me that there's obviously an agenda here, and this is just another perfect example of government spending at its finest and putting special interests before the taxpayers, and shame on me if I support this. So I still don't support this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Gutenkauf?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the committee to speak to this question of the number of hours the consultant contract is proposed to be for versus the number of hours that the consultant has actually been working. I think this is a really critical question. I appreciate that the committee is making commentary toward reducing the number of hours, but it's not a practical reduction in the amount of time it's been worked. So I really like to hear from the committee specifically about that issue.
Alderman York?
I'd like to make a comment. I think this is something that, we talked about when we were going through the assistant city manager thing, the assistant city manager discussions, and there have been reductions in hours over the course of time. But I was thinking about it a lot over the past week, and I think given what's occurring in Elmhurst now with the new TIF underway, the construction at Mariano's, I know interest has been piqued in the area. With regards to questions on land and that type of thing, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more of a demand for consultant services with increased economic activity. I think that's a good problem to have, and I think that's exactly why we have consultants that are on demand, so that when we have increased interest here, we can answer the questions that developers have, that real estate speculators have. We can get their questions answered in a professional manner and have people make good decisions to bring businesses to Elmhurst. So I'm hopeful that the hours go down on one side from a dollars and cents point of view, but I'm kind of hoping they go up, because I think we're going to see a lot of activity and economic development here, and these consultants provide a real and tangible service to people who are looking to bring their businesses to Elmhurst.
Alderman Levin?
I would like to say that Alderman Pezza, I know you put a lot of thought into your list, and I personally considered it. I think a number of the items were discussed. I know you weren't there for the entire meeting. The fact that it's just a cap doesn't mean that you can spend up to the cap, or you should spend up to the cap. And I leave it to the city manager, whose responsibility is to monitor to make sure that we are not using services needlessly. But in particular, on the question of the conflict of interest, I gave a lot of thought to that. I recall we had a written memo from the city manager on that topic of whether or not there was a conflict of interest, which we took into consideration. And if the discussion wasn't detailed enough, I can tell you that I think that people took it very seriously. There's a lot of talk about how it's self-regulating, but just because it imposes a duty on the contractor to disclose any conflicts or potential conflicts doesn't mean that if the city sees such potential conflicts that we have abrogated the duty to also call that to question. I've talked to Terry Pastica from the Citizens Advocacy Center. It's a hard name to say. And I think if there's some concerns about strengthening that language, we're not letting the contract. I'd be happy to have that discussion, as I told her, and share it with the city attorney if there's some feeling that that concern or that conflict language needs to be strengthened. But I feel that the contracts are appropriate. I think it's not just a discussion of what fine gentlemen these are, but I think they have unique skills and experiences that help us as a city get good results.
Alderman Worley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for either the city manager or the committee, if they could answer. But I assume that, as with all consulting contracts I've seen over the past 6 years, there will be a termination clause that can be exercised, a standard termination clause.
City Attorney Sturnian?
Yes. I think there was previously one in that agreement, and there will be again. And the manager and I have talked about that a little further, about the agreement this evening.
I just know that there's been concerns expressed about the length of the contract, and I didn't have a concern with that, but I just wanted to double check on the contract structure.
Any other comments? Alderman Dunn?
Another clarification issue similar to Alderman Worley. I think there's a cap of $900, but there's no minimum usage requirement for the, that we're committed to on this contract? Just to clarify with the committee.
Alderman Hipskin, would you like to respond?
There is no minimum. And with the 90-day termination clause, along with not using the consulting services, that pretty much gives us an out immediately if there was ever a reason.
Thank you. Alderman Gutenkau.
Thank you. Perhaps the committee could speak to how this contracting position fits in with potential staffing positions and whether that discussion happened at the committee level, the question of whether this consulting position and the question's going to come up with the next contract. We reduced city staff, moved to consulting. We have subsequently shifted the staffing of the city, and did that discussion happen, and if so, could you summarize that for us?
But, you know, we really didn't discuss it. I think we're going on 3 years that we've reduced. It was 3 years ago that we reduced the staffing, you know, which was a full-time person. We really didn't discuss restaffing this up. Just we don't another employee and benefits, pensions, you know, long-term. We didn't really discuss putting in a full-time person, and I would, you know, really wouldn't recommend that.
Follow-up?
Alderman Gutenkau.
But to be fair, we've hired an assistant city manager since then that we didn't have, with some restructuring of duties for some of these positions. Doesn't that come into play?
Well, we as a collective council hired an assistant city manager, so some of those duties, do they overlap or do they enhance each other? I'm sure they do.
Well, isn't that really the question then? Do they overlap?
No, not to what I'm seeing the city manager do.
Alderman Levin.
I just wanted to point out that we are 100 hours of consultant service in the real estate category less in this fiscal year projected than last year. I think the Van Slyke services are those of are unique real estate services generally that I wouldn't expect the assistant city manager has. So I don't know if we talked about it, but I think I thought about it.
Alderman York.
And I know with regard to Alderman Pez's question about consultation with the property management folks, King and Associates, that in talking with city staff, that most of that conversation centers around market lease rates and those types of things that Mr. Van Slyke is uniquely qualified to understand on a more global level than is city staff. So that was a bulk, if not all, of the discussions was those types of things, not, you know, did you get an invoice from this plumber or that plumber, not the day-to-day things that was alluded to earlier.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
One more.
Alderman Gutenko.
This is my final question. It has been our custom, when a contract is up, to evaluate the services of other providers. Did that come into play in this contract?
No, I don't think we did really look at any other providers at this point. These are unique services, and the tenure that both these consultants, well, we're just speaking to H right now, the tenure and the experience allows us to feel that they were very well qualified for the position.
Alderman York.
And I'd just like to add to that, too, that there's no, I've talked to City Manager Grabowski about this topic on at least a couple of occasions, and there's no hidden agenda here. I firmly believe if City Manager Grabowski didn't feel like he was getting value out of these services, that Mr. Van Slyke would still be at the table. That was one of the first things that I inquired about with city staff was, are these services valuable? Are these services that we have a better way of obtaining? And I haven't gotten any indication that that's the case. And we are not beholden to either consultant, but in particular, Mr. Van Slyke. If he's not doing a good job, I fully expect that Mr. Grabowski will let us know that, and we will make a change.
Any other comments? At this time, I would like to, Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. I think this conversation got a little off the subject here, for me at least. Once again, this isn't about whether or not the service is needed, or how nice these people are, or how long they've been here, and what we owe them for that. This is about the fact that the taxpayers are paying somebody to work here at City Hall that has a free office, that does business under the umbrella with another firm that does business with businesses who do business with the city. And I asked for a written opinion. In their contract, there's a conflict clause. It speaks to relationships and conflicts and all that good stuff. And that's where the question still lies. It's not if they're nice or if they've been here a long time. That's not the question. So let's cut to the chase and get to the bottom line. The question is whether or not, which wasn't answered, these individuals who work for another firm, the old city manager's firm, doing business with businesses that do business with our city is or could be a problem. Written opinion, never saw one, especially from our legal opinion. Everyone has their own opinion. I don't have a legal opinion. I have nothing to base this on other than my gut feeling, and my gut feeling tells me no, period.
Alderman Mulliner.
This was one of the items that we did discuss a number of different times. We've reviewed this with the city attorney and the city manager, and a great deal with the city attorney. We spent a lot of time talking about conflicts of interest. We've asked the firms that you're discussing whether or not there has been any work together. There has not been any work that's been done together. We've asked whether this actually does fall into the conflict of interest. We were told point blank that it does not meet that requirement of conflict of interest. And we feel that this is the same thing as a lawyer. There's a professionalism that's being brought to the table here, and the combination of the oversight by the city as well as the oversight by the individuals, that conflict of interest did not exist and does not exist, even though there is you may believe that there is an appearance, there really is not a conflict of interest. We've been told that by the attorney. Did we get a written opinion? I do not believe we did, but we did get that from the attorney directly.
Thank you, Alderman Mulliner. Any other comments? Okay, at this time, as Mayor Pro Tem, I would like to pass the gavel to Alderman Wagner, which would then allow myself to speak to the issue at hand. I also have concerns in regards to the duration of the contract. I am not up here to criticize the current work that Van Slyke has done for the city, but I would like to see a little bit heavier scrutiny and a shorter-term contract. The conflict of interest, and I did receive the memo from City Manager Grabowski, and I believe Alderman Mulliner and others who stated that debated heavily the concern of conflict of interest. There is a perception out there of conflict of interest, and that is something enough for me to not support this recommendation, that as well as the duration of the contract at hand. I am happy to see that the hours are being reduced, but I would also like to see more reporting on what is being worked on by this consultant and all our consultants in the city of Elmhurst. Thank you. And if there's no other comments, Alderman White?
He actually finishes this item.
Oh, he does?
He calls.
Okay.
Is there any other comments, any other questions about the reports? Alderman Levin.
I just want to note that I don't have the contract in front of me, but I'm pretty confident that my recollection is correct that we can terminate before the 3 years is up. Either side can terminate, I think it's 90 days notice. So the term is not locking us in, and secondly, the rate is at the same level throughout the 3 years as it was for the last 3 years. So I think those are two salient features of the contract.
Thank you. Chairman.
Well, in addition to that, if with the 90-day out clause, if we have any conflict of interest, we don't have to use them. It's as simple as that. We just stop using them. So if there's any questions, anything comes up with a contract, we just stop using that consultant, and basically they're not paid for something they're not doing. So it's, and then after 90 days of not using and not paying for that consultant, and we terminate the contract, it's over. So in all reality, I'm satisfied with the terms of this.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Clerk Spencer, will you call the roll?
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Pezza.
No.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Polumsky.
Aye.
11 ayes, 3 nays.
Okay, that report passes. I'm going to pass the gavel back to Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, being item I, being a report, consultant agreement for administrative services. Clerk Spencer, if you can please state the recommendation thereof.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee that the City Council direct the City Attorney to prepare a consultant agreement with Ken Bartels Consulting for administrative services as described above. Respectfully submitted, Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee. Signed by Stephen W. Hipskin, Chairman, Kevin L. York, Vice Chairman, Mark A. Mulliner, and Scott M. Levin.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer. If I can have a motion and a second to put this item on the floor for discussion. Alderman Hipskin and Alderman York is a second.
I think this is very closely aligned to the last discussion we had, but are there any specific questions about this?
Alderman Peasant.
No question, just once again, pretty much rewind back to the discussion we just had. Although I'm not as concerned that there could be the potential for conflict, given the scope of work this consultant actually does, but in regard to the extent of the potential crossing of the line and the relationship clause, for that reason, I don't think it would be fair to make an exception for this one, so I cannot support this one either.
Thank you. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Yes, my question relates specifically to the economic development portion of this contract. Was it not the city council's intent when we hired an assistant city manager to have some of the economic development duties fall under his role, responsibility, and how does that relate to this particular contract?
Alderman York.
Yeah, I think so, and I think the Assistant City Manager does a lot of economic development duties. Mr. Bartels spends a lot of his time in economic development. Number one, just because of his length of time in the community and his contacts from his prior jobs and everything, and has an excellent pool of well-suited professional business people here in the city. So he brings that Rolodex, if you will, of people, and over the past couple of years, we've added, I think, 6 people to the commission just in the past couple of years. So that's one benefit to Mr. Bartels. The second is the number of retention visits that Mr. Bartels does, and all the commissioners for that matter. They do those in a much different fashion than city staff could. They're not city staff, the commissioners and Mr. Bartels, they're interested business people, and the flavor of the conversation, because I've been on a retention visit with Mr. Bartels and with another commission member, and the whole atmosphere of that visit is different, I suspect, than if somebody were sitting down with the city manager or the city attorney or perhaps an alderman. So there's no doubt in my mind that Assistant City Manager Kopp has assumed and will continue to assume more roles related to economic development, but I firmly believe that the time that Mr. Bartels spends in working with the Economic Development Commission will pay this city back in spades.
Alderman Palumski.
Thank you. I think Mr. Bartels has done a great job with what we've asked him to do. For example, as Alderman York pointed out, he's taken the reins on the Economic Development Commission and led the way on retention visits, which will help keep our businesses here. But despite this, I think we need to get our ducks in a row here and see that what we're asking him fits into our overall communication and development goals. Some things might need to be changed. For example, Mr. Bartels has created and co-hosted Elmhurst Now, a cable television program, but we know from our city survey that only 8% of residents look to cable programming for city information. Though I think that example is an important one, we really can't make any suggestions about how the city's approach to communications and development should change, if at all, if we don't step back and take a systemic inventory of what we're currently doing, how our efforts are related, and what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm convinced that we can improve the efficiency in communication and development, and that still may involve the assistance, and I think it would, of Mr. Bartels. I don't want to stray from the agenda too much, but I will say that Alderman York and I are working together to look at and beyond the objectives of consultants to assess the work of all the offices, professionals, and groups that are involved with economic development and communication so that we can make some improvements.
Alderman Levin.
I just had a question. Is Mr. Bartels paid to host the cable TV show?
City Manager Grabowski.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You can definitely do that and give it.
Any other questions or comments from any elected officials? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Oh, yeah, I have a couple questions. Alderman York's comments raised in my mind. So, first of all, it sounds to me like we're buying proprietary information by contracting with Mr. Bartels because he brings a Rolodex of business contacts. So that does concern me that this is the kind of information and the kind of tool the city should use, that it remains proprietary with the consultant, just based on the way that I understood what you said. It sounds like Mr. Bartels' retention visits are an incredibly important component to the city's economic development, yet mirror the things that the commission members do. Perhaps that is a consideration that we should discuss, is should he be a commission member rather than a consultant? And finally, are we thinking that Assistant City Manager Kopp is in a transitional period at the end of which we will reduce the number of consultant hours because Assistant City Manager Kopp will have transitioned to the economic development as you stated it?
Any other questions or comments?
So that's how it sounds to me, and I mean, given all of those things, I don't really see that reflected in this report, and I would like to see the report have more direction to to the contract writer about how you really envision his duties and what they should be. While I appreciate that that'll be fleshed out in the contract, I think a report should have more detail directing the contract.
Alderman Gutenkopf, are you making a motion or just making a statement?
At this point, I don't know what that would, how a motion would come out of that, other than to rewrite the report.
Thank you. Alderman York.
I just have, respectfully, I'm not sure what the first, if you had a question on the first part, with relation to your comment about, or your observation about Mr. Bartels doing many retention visits and the commissioners doing a few. The commissioners are unpaid volunteers. And, most of them do 2 to 3 retention visits a month. Just on their own time, most of the time they go to businesses and meet at their offices, so it's not a matter of, there's any expense involved with it, except that it is a lot of their time. So Mr. Bartels, on the other hand, is a paid consultant, and he does more of them because they are so important. It is important to get the information from existing businesses in town, because it's kind of like everything else with customers, clients, whatever it is. It's very expensive to lose a client. It's very expensive for the city of Elmhurst to lose a business, so it's very important that we take care of those people. And Mr. Bartels does a lot of retention visits on a monthly basis that supplements what the commissioners do for free.
Alderman Levin.
I just want to also add that in terms of the scope or the magnitude of what we're talking about, there are 111 hours to date spent on economic development. It comes out to about 14 hours a month, or like 3 hours a week. It's not a full-time job. It's a consultant who's providing some assistance. So I think that when I looked at it, I felt like it's a resource available to city management, and that they will use it as it's needed, not just run up to the cap, and I have every confidence that they won't, but it's important to understand the magnitude of what we're talking about here.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
Yeah, well, I have a follow-up question to that, and I appreciate that, and to provide, that's why my question about, is this intended to be transitional as Assistant City Manager Kopp takes on more economic development duties? But I also have a question about retention visits, because I thought we were paying another consulting firm to do that. Isn't that part of the role of Kathy Maloney's firm, to do business retention and retention visits and recruiting?
It's recruiting efforts, not for
Not
funding.
retention visits.
No, it's recruiting. Recruiting new businesses into town.
Thank you.
Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. I believe maybe there's a wording problem, but I do recall that the fines all description was to recruit and retain businesses. So whether that outlines visits, I'm not sure, but maybe that's what Alderman Gutenkopf is referring to. But my last question is, I'm just curious, because I never heard discussion as to where the committee came up with the agreed to $90 and $100 per hour rate. What database did you use? Where did you pull your references from as to how this dollar amount is legit? Where did we get that data from?
Alderman Levin.
I'm going to speculate here because I don't think it was specifically talked about, but my understanding is that we discussed it was that was the existing rate that had been negotiated in the prior contract for 3 years, and it's staying the same for 3 years, which seemed like a reasonable mechanism. And if I'm mistaken, City Manager, please correct me.
City Manager Grabowski, would you have anything to add?
I have nothing to add. That's correct.
All right, try this one more time. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Clerk Spencer, if you may call the roll for item I, the consultant agreement for administrative services.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Pezza.
No.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Palumski.
Aye.
11 ayes, 3 nays.
11 ayes, 3 nays. That report passes. The next agenda item is item double F, being an ordinance approving the 26th Amendment to real estate purchase contract for the purchase of the real property commonly known as 260 North York Street. Alderman Clerk Spencer, if you could read the ordinance, please.
Did you, I think, okay. An ordinance approving the 26th Amendment to real estate purchase contract for the purchase of the real property commonly known as 260 North York Street, Elmhurst, Illinois. Paul, I. Did you just say that?
I did.
Yeah, that's right.
If I could
don't
have-
usually read the whole ordinance. Thank you.
If I could have a motion and a second to put this item on the floor for discussion. Alderman Mulliner is first. Alderman Pez is the second. Discussion, Alderman Mulliner.
This is just asking for an extension for the contract with the Pauli property so that they can finalize the details of it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. Once again, I do not approve of the extension of this particular item because I do not approve of the financial terms involved in the agreement itself, which I cannot discuss here, but I do not support the financial terms.
Thank you, Alderman Pezza. Any other comments or questions? Seeing Alderman Healy.
Thank you. I also will be voting no, just because I disagree with the extension.
Making sure there's no other questions or comments. Seeing none, if Clerk Spencer, you may call the roll for this ordinance.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Pezza.
No.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Palumski.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Tipskin.
Aye.
Healy.
No.
Levin.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Worley.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
10 ayes, 4 nays.
10 ayes, 4 nays. That ordinance passes. Moving on to the next agenda item, number 7, being reports and recommendations of appointed and elected officials. Any reports or recommendations? Alderman, or City Manager Grabowski?
Thank you. I have a number of them. Earlier it was asked about ComEd, and Alderman Healy had asked about that at the last meeting. We have spoken with our ComEd representative, John O'Halloran, and in front of you tonight is the contents of an email which he sent to us with updates of what ComEd has done throughout the city as far as updating our infrastructure. We're happy to share that with anyone in the audience who would like to see it as well. Also attached to that was a news release from ComEd regarding the ICC and the modernization, the grid modernization law. They're looking to work through some issues that they have with the ICC. What ComEd offered is they would happily come here and talk to the city council after the first of the year. They're trying to get this behind them, and then they'll come and give an update. In the meantime, what we're gonna do is take the circuits that are in the written portion and put it on a map so that you have an idea of what which circuits the improvements help in the area of the city. We didn't have a chance to do that for tonight, I apologize, but we'll get that out to you as soon as we can. The Irish Spring 5K race, which was talked about at the last meeting, I want to give an update on that. We scheduled a meeting with the participants, with the coordinators of the race, the parade, the police department, and the Spring Road Association. So we're going to have that meeting this week. I'll report back to the council as I can on that to work through the issues that are out there. And then the last item is just a reminder that the annual JRB meeting for the 3 TIF districts is scheduled for December 10th at 6 p.m. immediately before committee meetings for that night. Notices have gone out to the affected taxing bodies, and it'll be in this room at 6 p.m. December 10th.
Thank you, City Manager Grabowski. Next agenda item being ordinances, 8A. Clerk Spencer, if you may read the ordinance, please.
An ordinance for the levy and assessment of taxes for the fiscal year beginning May 1, 2012, and ending April 30th, 2013, of the City of Elmhurst, DuPage, and Cook Counties, Illinois.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer. May I have a motion and a second to put this item on the table for discussion? Alderman Hipskin is the first. Alderman Mulliner is the second.
Someone has to do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll second.
Okay, too late.
Okay, so this is a formality, the last part of the levy that we've discussed and debated. Once again, it's a reduction of the overall number for the city of Elmhurst side. Once again, it's a tax decrease for the citizens of Elmhurst.
Thank you, Alderman Hipskin. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, Clerk Spencer, if you may call the roll.
Okay. Hipskin.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Pezza.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. That ordinance passes. Moving on to the next item, 8B, being the ordinance vacating a portion of Walnut Street right-of-way.
That's it.
Sorry.
Did it for me, thank you.
Sorry, Clerk Spencer. May I have a first and a second to put this item on the table for discussion? Alderman Morley and Alderman Kennedy. Discussion, Alderman Morley.
No discussion.
Any other discussion from any other alderman? If Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. You have to look this way. Well, here we are on the same night. We're looking to sell taxpayer-owned land in a TIF district for 34 cents a square foot, while we also just approved an extension to purchase land with taxpayer dollars for a significant amount of money over market value, in my personal and professional opinion. So I've been thinking about this for quite some time, because it really does bother me that land in Elmhurst could sell for 34 cents a square foot. And I thought, what else could anybody buy in this day and age for 34 cents? And I've been out a lot lately doing Christmas shopping. And as I'm out shopping, I've searched high and low for something that cost 34 cents. And I had a really hard time finding something. But lo and behold, as I was leaving the store, there was a little machine out in the hallway, and I got it. A gumball. I did have a few pennies left over from my 34 cents after my quarter gumball, but I couldn't even buy 2 gumballs for 34 cents. So, that being said, you know, this is sadly typical City of Elmhurst MO when it comes to real estate sale and purchase. We basically sell land for the cost of a gumball. Sometimes we just give it away. But when we buy land with taxpayer dollars, we get out the gold coins. I'm not sure where that policy came from, but I think it's a very poor policy. And like I said last time, if the joke weren't on the taxpayers, it might be funny, but this really isn't funny. As someone in the profession, as a taxpayer, and as an elected official, I think it's a poor government policy and very poor practice. And heck, where else can you get land for the price of a gumball? I guess Elmhurst, it's the only place I know. So I don't support this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you. It's always such a difficult thing when we talk about a land vacation. I just think it's important for us to remember, this is probably the best deal that we could have negotiated for this particular parcel. I encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Gutenkopf. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, City Clerk Spencer, if you may call the roll for this ordinance, please.
Morley.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Mullenor.
Aye.
Pezza.
No.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Bram.
No.
Palumski.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Hipskin. Hipskin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
12 ayes, 2 nays.
12 ayes, 2 nays. This ordinance passes. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 9, being other business, 9A. This is where we open the discussion and debate of the selection of interim mayor. To preface this, and I'll hand it off to City Manager Grabowski to provide additional guidance. I would recommend that we go about this by looking for nominations for those who would like to be the interim mayor from now until the April 9th election. I would also like to recommend that anybody who has declared candidacy for mayor, that nomination be withheld at this time. But Alderman, or I keep saying Alderman, City Manager Grabowski, do you have anything else to add before we open it up to discussion?
I don't. The city attorney gave a memo to the council 2 weeks ago regarding the process. So if anyone has questions, certainly we could answer those.
Any questions on the process? Not seeing none. Open up for discussion for nominations. Alderman Mullenor.
And due to the fact that I'm a candidate for mayor, I respectfully decline any nomination for the interim mayor's position.
Thank you, Alderman Mullenor. Alderman Gutenkopf.
And I too respectfully decline any potential nominations as I'm a candidate for mayor as well.
Thank you, Alderman Gutenkopf. Any other discussion? Alderman Pezza.
I'm not a candidate for mayor, but I also decline, and I would just like to thank Alderman Mulner and Alderman Gutenkopf for their integrity and for their statement they just made. I agree with that intent, and I'm also kind of borderline wondering if it would be in the best interest of all for even people running for any seat to consider not taking the interim mayor seat. But at this point, I definitely support the fact that mayoral candidates would not be the best option for that seat right now.
Thank you, Alderman Pezza. Alderman Morley.
Thank you. I obviously didn't draw my hand quick enough. I too respectfully withdraw my name at this time for consideration.
Thank you, Alderman Morley. Any other discussion? Alderman Hipskin.
I'd like to thank Alderman Morley for his integrity in this matter, and I'd like to nominate Alderman Levin for mayor.
Doesn't even need a second. Doesn't even need a second. Under Robert's rules, it doesn't even need a second. Anybody else can be nominated. There's any other nominations?
Thank you, Alderman Hipskin. So at this time, we have Alderman Levin as the first and only nomination. Are there any other nominations? Alderman Gutenkopf.
I think we ought to consider Alderman Hipskin as the longest-serving alderman not running for office, not running for re-election or another office, and as the chairman of the Finance Committee, it has typically been our practice to go to the chairman of the Finance Committee in an emergency, so I think we ought to consider him as well.
Is that a nomination, Alderman Gutenkopf?
As a nomination.
We have two nominations, Alderman Hipskin and Alderman Levin. Alderman Hipskin.
I'd like to decline the nomination. My work and family life will not allow me to do the job that needs to be done.
Thank you, Alderman Hipskin. Any other nominations at this time? Seeing none, do we need to actually do a vote? It seems like it's all in favor.
All in favor would be okay.
I think a show of support and roll call, Mr. Chair, would be a good idea.
Sure.
Okay.
Clerk Spencer, may we call the roll in the nomination for...
Didn't need a second, correct?
No, we do not.
Did not.
Okay.
For Alderman
I'll s-
Levin.
Okay, I'll start with Hipskin,
Aye.
Healy,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Morley,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Do I turn it over?
Mulliner,
Aye.
Heza,
Aye.
Gutenkopf,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Palumski,
Aye.
York.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
Seeing 14 ayes, 0 nays, that nomination carries. Congratulations, Alderman Levin. And if I may, Alderman Levin, if I may make the final motion of tonight's meeting and call for a motion.
Swear 'em in first.
Needs to swear me.
Oh, we have to swear him in.
We have to swear that.
Stand up for the picture, please.
Stand up. We can go to the podium. I could swear you in, so you can take the gavel tonight, Alderman Levin.
No, he doesn't have to say, he has to decide. He doesn't have to decide any particular.
I thought it was permanent or not.
He doesn't have to
Does that work?
possibly happening. If he doesn't say, he says that he always serving
This is on it.
chair.
Okay, like Mike.
Okay. I state your name. Do solemnly swear and affirm
Do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the charter laws and ordinances of the City of Elmhurst,
and the charter laws and ordinances of the City of Elmhurst,
and that I am qualified to serve,
that I am qualified to serve,
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of acting mayor of the City of Elmhurst
of acting mayor of the City of Elmhurst
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
At this time, Mr. Levin, if you may take the seat and adjourn the meeting. Mr. Mayor.
Well, now we're here for the most important part of the meeting, but before I take a motion, I'd just like to say I want to thank my fellow aldermen for the confidence you've expressed in letting me assume this position for the interim duration. I will commit myself to try to be a very good steward of this position until someone else is rightfully elected. And with that, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Alderman Morley, seconded by Alderman Hipskin. All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.